Surprise, everybody! It is I am the one and only Sonic the Hedgehog here, aka the Blue Blur, aka Blue Justice, and I am from the likes of the Mexi Toys videos here. And ladies and gentlemen, we'll present you our long-awaited Let's Play we are about to be doing right now. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we'll present you our Let's Play of Sonic Rush for the Nintendo DS. This game did first came out in 2005, around the same year as in Shadow the Hedgehog, and fun fact, this game did came out around the same day as in Shadow the Hedgehog, usually came out in Journey Bombs event sometime in November in 2005. So relatively speaking, I was about the fact that as far as for this particular game is concerned, I'm actually really looking forward to able to doing this game for you guys, because I know for a fact that it's been a very long time since we were originally trying to plan this, but now it's finally happening, and as a result, I'm very excited for it. So because of that though, just to continue supporting to doing some more Sonic Let's Plays and Journey Forms have been this year in particular, because obviously with Sonic Cross Shadow Generations is still coming in Journey Forms have been this year. So yeah, without further ado, let's dive right into Sonic Rush for the Nintendo DS. And right off the bat though, is about the fact that we immediately start things off with the very first level in the game, and that's what appears to be Leaf Storm as Sonic. Because the reason why I say as Sonic, because as far as I'm aware, we'll get into more details about that particular topic if we continue playing for this. So even then, and as you can see, the gameplay in this game plays pretty similar to the forms of how it does it in not only in Sonic Advance, but also with Sonic Advance 2, as well as Sonic Advance 3. Or to be more accurate though, for the sake of Sonic Advance 2, because this game is heavily utilizing with the forms of speed. That's only mainly because this game right here was actually the introduction to the boost gameplay. Yes, before Sonic Rush Adventure, as well as Sonic Unleashed, and even Sonic Colors, and even especially noticeable with Sonic Generations, with both the console version as well as the 3DS version, and even not to mention though with Sonic Forces, and especially noticeable with Sonic Frontiers, and even the upcoming Shadow Generations for the majority of Sonic Cross Shadow Generations coming up. So because of that though, yeah, we'll explain more details about that in a moment, because as you can see, is that somehow I managed able to use the boost on that special generator, which means if you managed able to do a long boost, this pretty much transports us into the special stage. Now let's get to the special stage itself before we get into more details about Sonic Rush. And as you can see, in order to able to take control of Sonic in these types of special stages, mind you, we go into Half Pipe again, since in Sonic the Hedgehog 2, which obviously Dimps loves able to reuse the Half Pipe sequences just before not only Sonic Colors on the DS, as well as Sonic Generations on the 3DS, even especially noticeable with Sonic the Hedgehog 4 Episode 2. So as you can tell, is that in order to take control of Sonic right here, is that this is what the stylus comes into play for your touchscreen experience. So basically though, it's about the fact you simply just drag Sonic from left and right, and you can basically just try to able to collect rings. So as you can see, we somehow collected about 100 plus rings on the first part. Now we come to the second part, where basically we need to get even more rings. So you can either do this by either collecting rings as normal, or if you come across into that particular special spring object, or specifically with that star icon symbol, basically you can able to perform certain quick time reaction timing, or specifically quick time events. So basically though, you simply have to able to just select 1 all the way up to certain numbers. Like this for instance, I need to go into the correct order of numbers. So if I do the wrong combination, obviously though, I can't get rings. So because of that though, yeah, the first special stage is pretty self-explanatory and easy. So because of that though, thankfully though, just like in Sonic Advance 1, as well as Sonic Advance 3, I'm only going to be doing these special stages in one attempt. So because of that though, whilst unlike in Sonic Advance 2, I have to do multitude of special stage attempts within each and every single character. Like, my goodness, while looking back in Sonic Advance 2, even to this day, the special stages system is so ridiculous. So anyway, so yeah, let's get back into the forms of the gameplay itself of Sonic Rush itself. So obviously, in order to actually get your boost gauge increasing, or should I say, the tension gauge is that you need to perform certain tricks, or you can able to actually jump onto certain enemies. So basically though, that is where essentially you're able to actually get your tension gauge increases, so that way you can able to actually boost. So because of that though, yeah, it's actually a pretty cool mechanic, especially noticeable that I'm very glad that the boost gauge was actually continuously supported for the future Sonic games, as I mentioned this before earlier, for a multitude of Sonic games, from Sonic Unleashed, Sonic Colors, Sonic Generations, and you get the idea for this point. So, and as you can see, we somehow completed the first act in Leaf Storm, so overall Leaf Storm is actually really easy. And of course, as to be expected, for the sake of the forms of those of you seen our Let's Plays of not only Sonic Pocket Adventure for Neo Geo Pocket Color back in 2019, as well as the forms of Sonic Advance 1 and 2 in 2020, as well as Sonic Advance 3 for 2021, you do realize about the fact that this game is being developed by DIMS. So because of that though, so you know what that means, folks, is that in the first beginning portion is actually really easy, whilst later on though, it gets a bit difficult though, especially noticeable that for those of you probably wondering what DIMS loves to do nowadays, is that they added in not only quite a few bottomless pits, but it's also with the forms of some cheap enemy placement sometimes. So, but even then, no. Again, we'll get into more details about that in a moment. So, anyway, a few things I want to talk about this is about the fact that, well, today's date, of course, is the 6th of May today, in some cases in 2024 today, and yeah, if you're probably wondering to yourself about the fact that, yes, indeed, I finally managed able to cheer myself up after that particular massive heartbreak moment during the Evolves event 2 days ago, actually. So generally speaking though, thanks to both Mighty and Ray, did somehow cheer me up at long last after that particular breakup moments between both me and Tiana. So no matter what though, it's official that me and Tiana are no longer together. So because of that though, so for the time being, we'll just have to stick around with being friends for the time being. So because of that though, because I think fundamentally speaking, I was about the fact that I think Amy also did cheer me up as well, thanks to the forms of how it factored with this entire introduction, ever since in the forms of recently, that both Mighty and Ray are now playing through Super Mario Advance, in some cases Super Mario Bros. 2, for the 3rd time through our channel anyway. Oh god, I couldn't imagine about the fact that if we decided to Super Mario Advance 2 at some point in the future, that'll be the 2nd time we're going to be experiencing Super Mario World in some cases. So because of that though, yeah, we'll stay tuned for that, enjoying at some point in later on in 2024, or perhaps even maybe next year for 2025 if possible. So anyway, so that pretty much does it for Act 2 in Leaf Storm. And just like the forms of how it does it in, I would say since in Sonic Advance 2, that every once in a while we will come across into a boss fight after you complete both acts in a zone. So yeah, we've met again, Dr. Eggman, except this time around, I really love the actual presentation in this game right off the bat, because differently from the likes of in Sonic Advance 1, as well as Sonic Pocket Adventure, even with Sonic Advance 2, as well as Sonic Advance 3, the actual visual presentation is a massive step up. Since that this is on the Nintendo DS after all, this means that the forms of the character models, including with the forms of the level design, is actually now in 2.5D, something very similar to the forms of how it does it for those of you who ever experienced the Klonoa games, specifically Klonoa Door to Phantomile, as well as Klonoa 2, Lunity's Veil before, except this time we're playing a Sonic game for the sake of 2.5D. So because of that though, so here we go with the first boss fight in the game, and as you can see, that the majority of the gameplay screen, specifically when you're trying to take on Dr. Eggman of all things, usually does manage to take place in a top screen. However, in the bottom screen, as you can see, it actually shows you how many hits you have left to be able to actually deal with Dr. Eggman right here. And I do know for the fact that certain bosses do have their names, by the way, which I will have to be quite frank here. I think I will also able to mention more about those specific boss names in the future, because relatively speaking, I was about the fact that for those of you probably wondering, not only about the fact that the main selling point of this game is not only for its introduction to the boost gameplay formula, but it's also about the fact that this game was actually the first time ever that it's actually introduced into a brand new character, which you'll find out after we're dealing with this particular boss fight right here. I mean, for the most part, it's actually pretty easy, but the hardest part, I will admit though right away, keep this in mind though, is about the fact that much like the forms of how it does it not only in Sonic Advance 1, as well as Sonic Advance 2, as well as Sonic Advance 3, this game still utilizes with the difficulty setting. So this means currently I'm on normal mode. So this means the only differences between both easy mode and normal mode is how much hits you have for specifically with certain bosses. So for instance, we're going to be experiencing the entire game on normal mode. This means I only need to aim for 8 hits. However, if you change the setting into easy setting, it actually decreases 2 of them, making this 6 hits to deal with certain bosses. And even every once in a while is that certain boss patterns are actually very tricky to avoid on a normal mode, whilst compared to on easy mode. And keep this in mind though, yes indeed, I still managed to have myself the actual physical cartridge version of the game. Well, mind you, back then, I set the game on easy mode, and believe it or not though, I did somehow receive this game back in the day in 2006, just before when Sonic the Hedgehog 2006 released, specifically on the Xbox 360 version during that time. So either way though, and what's this? We actually got ourselves the first introduction to Blaze the Cat, which is actually her first ever debut in this game, and eventually she becomes more relevant in the future Sonic games to come. Well, some exceptions in particular. Who's that? Which, yes indeed Sonic, this is actually the introduction to, well, as I said earlier, Blaze the Cat, which we'll get into more details about the forms of Blaze the Cat and so for later, because for now, Leaf Storm is being completed. So let's see how well I did, and, I was so close to get myself the best rank, which I'm fine with the A rank for now, because keep that in mind though, this is still on normal mode after all. So because of that though, and also keep this in mind, this is also the first time ever in a Sonic game to able to introduce a brand new rank, just before Sonic the Hedgehog 2006, as well as Sonic Unleashed, and any other Sonic games as well. So apparently though, this game was actually the first introduction to the S rank. So if you thought to yourselves that Sonic 06 was technically the first game to introduce the S rank, well, you're wrong, because Sonic Rush was actually the first game to introduce the S rank. So because of that though, yeah, it seems pretty cool and interesting at the same time. So either way though, so it looks like we have ourselves a interesting conversation with Tails around here. So yeah, in addition to that though, is about the fact that it looks like no matter what though, we're about to jump right into the next zone. And believe it or not though, we'll discuss more details about the forms of the next zone coming up in a second, because as soon as we finish up with the first zone in the game, we can now have the ability to able to go back to the character selection screen and able to play as Blaze the Cat. However though, I will play as Blaze the Cat until for later, because as you can see, we actually have a map screen. So basically though, we can't do anything at the moment, besides we can able to go to the next zone. So yeah, it seems a pretty cool place to able to traverse into. So anyway, let's go ahead and get started with Zone 2, and that's what appears to be known as Water Palace. Now, for those of you probably wondering, that zone looks familiar. Well, for those of you ever experienced Sonic Generations, specifically the 3DS version of Sonic Generations, where basically this level decided to brought back in Sonic Generations for the 3DS on the handheld era. Because the reason why I say the handheld era is mainly because on the 3DS version of Sonic Generations, not only does it contain 3 zones in a classic era, as well as that, 2 zones from the Dreamcast era, and even 2 zones from the handheld era, which are, well, one of them is actually Water Palace from Sonic Rush, and a DS version of Tropical Resort from Sonic Colors DS. So, yeah, it seems a pretty cool place, I'm not gonna lie. Mind you though, is about the fact that it's a bit too early to able to actually come across into water in this particular game so far, although mind you about the fact that this is only just the beginning of Sonic Rush itself. In fact, let me know in the comments down below for the question of the day. Did you ever experience Sonic Rush before? And if you have your nostalgia memories with this game? Because I think, fundamentally speaking though, is that the first time I've ever experienced Sonic Rush was, again, back in 2006. And believe it or not though, this game right here was actually the 3rd DS game I've actually got and owned, likely also for the sake of the forms of how the fact that back then, I did manage to have myself my actual original Nintendo DS model alongside with Mario Kart DS as a core bundle back in the day. And later on though, I somehow received my second DS game, which appears to be Super Monkey Ball Touch and Roll, because I was a big fan of the Super Monkey Ball back then. Especially noticeable because I still managed able to, well, keep on getting those other games for the Super Monkey Ball series in the future years to come, which I always support those series, because that is how, about the fact that I was basically excited for the next new entry when that particular next installment has been announced or released. So either way, so let's go down here to able to actually come across into a special generator, but before I do that, I'll deal with that enemy right here to able to actually increase my attention gauge, and that way we can able to boost once again to able to traverse into the or teleport rather onto the second special stage. So because of that though, and by the way, something's worth noting for, yes, if you're following through our videos, for the majority of the mission mode on Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing, thanks to Piglet, that basically though you do recognize this music in the background on the special stage. That song was actually known, or was actually called A New Day. So as a result, yeah, that's the reason why that Piglet did somehow hint at that on that particular mission mode videos in Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing, because even then though, yeah, that's actually pretty swell. And something's worth noting for, I love the soundtrack in Sonic Rush, and as far as I'm usually concerned, it's actually composed by the same person who also did, let's just say, Jet Set Radio, which, if I recall correctly, although I may be wrong, although let me know in the comments in this section down below, so just to want to know about the forms of specific facts. So anyway, oh yeah, every once in a while though is about the fact that you need to tap on the touchscreen on specific Eggman's robots, by the way, because if you try to able to keep on attacking those Eggman's robots on certain special stages, it actually gives you some additional rings. Although, mind you, we're going to be collecting, like, I don't know, 5 rings or something? Well, mind you, I didn't pay attention to the top screen as much, because I'm usually focuses on, you know, the bottom screen and stuff like that. And like I said before, that the entire special stage in Sonic Rush is going to take place in 2 parts. Whilst unlike the equivalents to this, and that's what appears to be Sonic Colors on the DS, where basically though you have to do it 3 laps, and rather than collecting rings, you have to collect 3 multicolored balls in journey forms of 3 laps respectively, which then again we'll get into more details about the forms of Sonic Colors on the DS at some point later down the road, just before God knows if Sonic Cross Shadow Generations is about to be fastly approaching. So either way though, I mean for the most part, the beginning portion of these special stages are pretty easy, although until later on though, it gets a lot more tricky and difficult. I'm looking at you Special Stage 7 by the way, because yeah, we'll get to more about that if we get to next week or something, because as far as I'm aware, the actual uploading schedules for Sonic Rush is obviously going to be taking place not only on Mondays, but also on Wednesdays and Fridays. So I just want to let you guys know that, because obviously, like I said before, that both Mighty and Ray are already working on the forms of Super Mario Advance 1 recently, and they are both working on it in the weekends, whilst meanwhile for my ex-girlfriend, Tiana, that she's still currently playing through Princess Peach Showtime. So because of that though, yeah, you get the idea for this point. So yeah, the second Chaos Emerald has now been obtained. So, and I believe the actual color order is basically the exact same color order as the forms of not only Sonic Advance, but also with Sonic Advance 2, as well as Sonic Advance 3. So basically the first emerald is obviously the red emerald, and the final emerald is obviously the purple one. Whilst eventually in Sonic Rush Adventure, I believe we have to able to collect the exact same color order as well. Although, before we get to Sonic Colors on the DS, where basically the color order of the Chaos Emeralds is going to be a lot different. So because of that though, again, we'll get to more details about that if we get around to it. So either way, the first act of Water Palace is done, and now we move on to Act 2. Oh, and something's worth noting for, if you do get a game over at one point, much like the forms of how it does it in Sonic Advance 2, where basically though, I think that could be also applies for Sonic Advance 1, if I recall, although to be more specifically, it's a Sonic Advance 2 kind of system, where basically though, if you do get a game over in one of those zones in particular, like if you got some good progression, obviously though, you have to go back in square one for one of those acts in this zone. So because of that though, for example, if I run out of lives in Act 2, in Water Palace, and basically though, if I get a game over, and if I go back into a zone, this means I have to go back to Act 1 instead of continuing on for Act 2, unlike in Sonic Advance 1 as well as Sonic Advance 3. So basically though, as I said before, it functions the same way as in Sonic Advance 2 basically, so... And I will admit though right away, I love the sense of speed in this game, much like in Sonic Advance 2, because obviously though, unlike in Sonic Advance 2, there's actually a boost state mechanic, whilst in this game in particular, it's all about the tension gauge you have to put up with. So, now in order to be able to perform tricks in this game, you can either decide able to grind on rails at one point, just like in Sonic Advance 2, and as well as Sonic Advance 1, only with both Sonic and Amy, by the way, because Knuckles and Tails doesn't seem to able to grind on rails in Sonic Advance 1, whilst the majority in Sonic Advance 2, as well as Sonic Advance 3, that basically though, if you grind on rails, then obviously you can do it from there. However, in this game, if you try to press the R button, you can able to perform certain tricks with it, and then once you get launched into the dash ramp as well as the spring, you can able to actually perform a button combination tricks. Or to be more accurate, though, is that in order able to perform tricks, is that when you're in midair, I believe you have to press the B button in order to perform certain tricks. And speaking of which though, much like in forms of in Sonic Advance 2 as well as Sonic Advance 3, that if you get launched in the air, you can able to actually perform certain other cool tricks as well, ranging from an air dash, and especially noticeable with the forms of the up little dash as well, like for instance right here, that you can able to actually get ourselves a little bit of a boost when it comes to able to reach higher places. So because of that though, yeah, you get the idea for that point. Now as far as I'm aware, since we're going to be playing as Sonic, of course, I believe the actual boost is actually called the Super Boost, because if we get to Blaze's playthrough, which we'll get to that eventually later on, that it might actually call it a different name for that. So because of that though, yeah, for the most part, I really do enjoy the soundtrack in this game, and I will admit though right away, I do really love the aesthetics in Water Palace, by the way. It is really cool looking. And of course, much like the forms of how it does it on not only Sonic Pocket Adventure, as well as the majority of the Sonic Advance games, every once in a while you have to able to actually just to come across into certain dangerous paths here and there, including most notorious one of them all is definitely the Bottomless Pit, because obviously though, if you fell into a Bottomless Pit, you will die automatically. And to make matters worse though, I'm afraid to tell you is that in one of the later zones, we're able to actually bring back the crushing blocks since Sonic Advance 3, so oh boy, I'm a little bit more scared about this, but hopefully though I will try my best to able to do not die as many times as I think it was. So what's up with this strange little color scheme of Eggman? I mean, surely that doesn't sound right. I mean, it could be something more accurately a bootleg of Eggman or something, or perhaps even maybe, just maybe, is actually going to be an alternate dimension of Eggman, or should I say a recolor of Dr. Eggman, which I suppose that Merxy has already on about it since in Sonic 06 playthrough, but even then, if we managed able to move on to the next little speech bubble text, and oh my god, it's Dr. Eggman Nega! So, rather than fight against with Dr. Eggman, but we're fighting against with Dr. Eggman Nega instead. Something fishy is going on. But either way, let's move on to the next boss fight right here. Now, I will admit though right away is that certain bosses feels like a waiting game basically, because you have to wait until when the attack finishes, and it's your chance to able to actually attack one of the glass dome in certain bosses. So because of that though, yeah, kind of thinking about it, this particular boss fight kind of reminds me of one of those legendary creatures you find in Scotland, because as far as I'm aware, it's almost inspired by it, except the fact that it's awfully close. So because of that though, maybe I keep thinking about the forms of a lot of history vibes too much. But anyway, something's worth noting for as well is about the fact that, yes indeed, about the fact that when it comes to the forms of others discussions, I'd like to point things out, and that's what appears to be about the fact that, yes indeed, we've only got about exactly 17 more days to go until Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door on Switch Remake is definitely getting closer to its release. And, yeah, believe it or not though, I think suffice to say, until specifically by the end of May, we can probably get a chance to able to actually see the overview trailer for Luigi's Mansion 2 HD just before that game decides to release at some point until next month. But then again though, it's a bit difficult to tell at this point. I mean, let's face it though, it's just about the fact that I was really looking forward to able to be replaying through Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door again. Oh jeez, I did not expect it with that particular water to somehow sunk. And as a result, that Eggman Nega decides able to use that attack. So, yeah, I'm not able to just focus on this for right now, because I will admit it though, certain bosses can get a little bit tricky at times, mainly because no matter what though, still this is on normal mode after all, rather than on easy mode. So because of that though, yeah, as far as I'm aware, is that back in also in 2006 potentially as well, that when it comes to the forms of the history of getting certain DS games in the past, that after when I somehow got Sonic Rush back in 2006, I later somehow got myself not only Super Princess Peach, but also with the forms of New Super Mario Bros. In also in that year, except the fact I somehow got those two games in a different month. And meanwhile, during the forms being later in 2006, I somehow received, well, I used to have Tetris DS back then, but I no longer have it sadly, but that's just mainly because, well, at this point in time, I just somehow moved on to a different franchise now, and as far as I'm aware, later on as well, I also got Mario Luigi Partners in Time, so I can get myself my first ever experience when it comes to experiencing the RPG game on a handheld device. And finally, most notably, I somehow managed to receive Super Mario 64 DS later on in 2006, because I was originally trying to get that game when I somehow managed to finally get myself with the Nintendo DS itself, along with Mario Kart DS as a bundle. But back in Journey forms in early 2006, I ended up getting Super Monkey Ball Touch and Roll instead. So because of that though, I honestly don't mind about that at all. But unfortunately though, it wasn't until later on in 2007 when I somehow unfortunately lost my original cartridge of Super Mario 64 DS. But it wasn't until later on in 2010 that I somehow finally get a chance to get myself Super Mario 64 DS again, except this time with the forms of a new Peggy logo, to be more specifically with the lack of plus symbol. So yeah, that's my entire history about the forms of when I first experienced certain Nintendo DS games that I somehow got and owned back in the day. So yeah, you probably get the idea of what I was expecting. So yeah, there goes the forms of the second zone, in some cases Water Palace. So of course, we'll be back for that particular zone again eventually. Not just for that, but also with the forms of if I was to decide to do our redo Let's Play of Sonic Generations for the 3DS just before, you know, Sonic Cross Shadow Generations is about to be coming. So because of that though, so it looks like no matter what though, we do need to able to have a chat with Tails somewhere in his laboratory or anything else like that, because I think, according to the forms of that particular top screen right here, that little symbol right underneath our life counter, that the actual percentage number is actually increasing slightly. So this means about the fact that we've realized there's actually a problem with the space-time continuum. So because of that though, yeah, we'll get into more details about the forms of the space-time continuum thing for later, because so far we've somehow completed 2 zones, as well as we've somehow obtained 2 Chaos Emeralds so far. So yeah, pretty good progression so far. So yeah, you probably get the idea of what's gonna happen next. So relatively speaking though, after this particular serious chat with Tails, so now we can able to actually proceed into the 3rd zone, which does manage to take place somewhere in the desert. So because of that, I would have liked able to read the dialogue, but unfortunately though, I'm pretty much useless at reading, unlike Twilight Sparkle after all, because obviously though, Twilight Sparkle, she's pretty much an expert when it comes to reading stuff, you know? But either way, so now we're done with that, and suffice to say for this point guys, is that we're gonna ending stuff here. So join me next time for more of Let's Play of Sonic Rush for the Nintendo DS. Is that we're about to be going into the 3rd zone, which appears to be Mirage Road. So this will be interesting. So I'll see you guys until on Wednesday. Later fellas.